It's Mark and Pete and James.
Hello and welcome to the show. More colourful conversations with Mark and Pete, and this week with a special guest, James, from the Good News Show. So the key question today is who will win the UK general election? What are going to be the key issues? That's the question that the public are all asking. It looks like it's going to be a very tight election. On Thursday the 7th of May, we will know. Well, it seems as though no one will win. In fact, it's possible that there will not be a majority. But for our international listeners, many people may not always understand exactly the process in which the UK election actually unfolds. So I'm going to start by setting up the scene. And this is a little poem called The Shape of Government. An election is accomplished by those who contest at cross purposes, have a cross to bear, speak with cross words, cross their hearts with care, support the cross with faith, double-cross their opponents, analyse till cross-eyed, cross-examine all exponents, claim it didn't cross their minds, get cross when politicians lingered, elect by simply making a cross, remain cross-fingered. Eventually, it's lost by those whose lines are crossed. The victors whose first crossed the line declare, term by term it's a vicious circle, and the process is fair and square. So, in simple terms, it is a very easy process, but remarkably, not everyone votes. So, Pete, what's your view on the build-up to the general election, and who do you think will win?
Well, I could summarise the general feeling of the build-up to the general election like this.
I see.
That for those on the webcam, you'll see that I yawned an extremely wide yawn there. It's just getting boring, and we're only just getting started on the build-up to the election. I mean, what it's going to be by the time we get to the election, I don't know. I think people are just going to be so, to use a polite term, fed up with it. They're just not going to, what they'll be really thinking, I think, can't be broadcast, especially not on a Christian podcast or radio show. So I think, people are just getting bored with it. But the other problem is, it's so difficult to make a decision. Now, this is shown by the fact that we had what's known in Britain as a hung parliament. We had it such that no one party was able to form government because they didn't get enough seats, because they didn't get enough votes, and so they had to form a coalition of different parties. And it's looking like it's going to be the same thing this time. People just aren't going to be interested. But the thing is, it's so important to consider who's going to be leading your country, who's going to be making those decisions. So it's really quite a sad state of affairs that people are in the end so bored with it they're not going to be interesting. But James is here with me. The Bible does say about the importance of leadership, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, one verse in particular, it's from 1 Timothy 2. I urge you then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. This is good and pleases our Saviour. Yeah. Yes. I mean, if I may take Peter's opinion of the election one further, might I add? I mean, as a hung parliament, I was very disappointed that they weren't, actually, quite frankly.
Weren't hung?
Yes, I think they should have been. I think it's going to happen again. I agree. I think it's going to be, a coalition is going to have to be forced. I mean, over the last 6 months to a year, they've tried to really, Cameron and Clegg have really tried to separate themselves from each other. But I think there's going to have to be another coalition. I just don't think there is the passion of the people to vote.
This is something that I want to bring up because, of course, there are a lot of burning issues and many people have been debating in the media and, of course, politicians have been pushing the hot topics. And we'll talk about what are the hot topics. But strangely enough, not many people typically tend to vote. I mean, depending on the point of view of the electoral style, and it seems as though that many people are finding that actually almost half of the electorate are not actually going to the polls or even using their postal vote. But bearing in mind that many people have protested about not having a vote or not even having a say over the many, many decades, now there's an opportunity to make a difference. So what, in your opinion, then, are going to be the burning issues?
Yeah. Well, you see, there were some obvious issues that have been highlighted. There's the problem with the economy. Now, it seems maybe it's not really the case in underlying economy, but it does seem that the problems have been sorted out to the extent that Britain is recovering more, it seems, from the recession than other countries in Europe. So I think that becomes important in that it's a positive for those parties that have been in government. What do you think of the issues?
Yes, I think the economy is certainly, of course, it's certainly a big issue, one of the big issues. I think immigration will always be an issue, no matter which party wins or indeed doesn't win. They say, well, if only you'd listened to us, we would have sorted it. The party that wins will say, well, yes, now we can cap immigration or we can let more in. And that, of course, will influence things like healthcare. Do we stay in Europe? Do we come out of Europe? I think faith is always going to be an issue. Do we ignore faith? Do we encourage more faith? Do we just say everyone can have whatever faith they like? But I would say, yes, Europe and immigration are certainly, depending on which papers you read, are certainly two of the other major issues.
Now that's an interesting issue you touched on there, because you touched on the fact that what faith people have. Now, it's always interested me that although there are many Christians in this country, and also quite a few Muslims and Jews, people from different faiths and none, when it comes to choosing a leader for the country, when it comes to choosing a party of whom the leader is going to be Prime Minister, the actual faith of the person who's going to fulfill that role is often ignored. And it was interesting to me that of the four major parties, or I guess there's five if you count the Greens. We've got Conservatives, we've got Labour, we've got Liberal Democrats, we've got UK Independence Party, UKIP, we've got Greens. Now, I don't know I know the political affiliations, but I don't know the religious affiliations of all of them. But I know that David Cameron, on the Good News Show, we referred to the fact that he claims to have some sort of Christian affiliation. It's perhaps, certainly from what he said, he's the most Christian of the leaders. But then you've got two people, Nick Clegg of the Liberal Democrats, Nigel Farage of UKIP, saying that they are atheists. And the question is, if you're a Christian, as we all are, what weight do we put on that when we're choosing a leader for our country? And people from other religions, what weight are they going to put on? What is the religious affiliation of these different leaders? But then, when I think about it a bit more, I think, hang on, we've done whole shows about the fact that David Cameron has made some very unchristian and unbiblical decisions and promoted policies which go against what it teaches in the Bible. I mean, I'm thinking particularly of allowing same-sex marriage, but I mean, there are other things as well. So, it becomes very difficult, becomes confused, because you don't know where people stand on faith issues, and no one seems to ask them.
And it's not something that typically tends to come up high on the agenda. So I think that certainly that's an important point, because somebody will have an opinion on faith. And of course, at the end of the day, what you believe in ultimately does shape your opinions. But I'd like to sort of go to our colleague here, Judgment James, to try and sort of set apart certainly where people view politicians, and particularly the true colours of politicians. So, Judgment James, would you give me your view on politicians in verse?
Yes, allow me, if I may, a moment of putting politics in the shade. Those grey politicians are all much the same, colourfully campaigning and all cast in shame. What of the rebel representing the red? I'm filled with dread by things he said. That bloke from out of the blue hasn't a clue. I cannot construe when anything is true. The foppish fellow in yellow is awfully mellow. His spineless speeches make me bellow. The grunge in the green needs a jolly good clean. A polish of policies to explain what they mean. Those purple people are not so whiter than white, smoking and boozing and all up for a fight. And those whose histories that are awfully black, how on earth do they ever keep coming back? In just a term, they turn everything upside down and then leave a state that's smelly and brown.
Yes. Well, this is true. Yes. But I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? That many people certainly in UK society find it very, very difficult to distinguish between certainly the two main parties. And that's part of the problem that we have. Certainly it was the problem in the last election, and we ended up with a coalition government. And the likelihood is that in some form we will end up with a coalition. Do you agree?
Yes, Mellow Mark. If I may use your slang name, speaking as myself, of course, I'm Pious Pete, as everyone knows.
Pious Pete, yes.
Or is it Pie-filled Pete? I'm not sure. But the question that we set right at the start of this episode of the show was who is going to win? And if you can't tell the difference between different parties, that is a problem. But I think that they have grown apart. That even the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives are taking different stances on things. I feel that this is, from my opinion, from looking at the different statements they've been making, it seems very different from last time. It seems that last time they seemed to be growing closer together.
Yes.
This time they do seem to me to be pulling further apart, as the media always put it. They're lurching to the right and lurching to the left. I'm not sure if that's the correct directions, but they seem to be lurching a lot and coming out with statements which oppose each other. But that doesn't help me to decide between them, because if you have, they just seem to be making statements, promises, but it doesn't mean they're going to keep them. It doesn't mean to make any difference whatsoever. So what I'd like to bring into it is that, right, we can't. The fact that they're making statements that are different doesn't mean that we can tell them apart, because people generally, and we're all infected by this, think of politicians as a class apart. They're all the same.
Yes.
In that they're all the same, in that their motivation is bad. I think we always think MPs are lowest of the low, next to journalists and lawyers.
Yes, absolutely. I think so too. And I think what people need to realise is that promises they can't keep. But I think once people realise that, well, they're saying stuff to win our votes. They're not winning our votes so they can then do stuff. And the last line of that poem, I think the politicians have moved from grey to a mess of brown. Now, individually, I sort of like individual things that all the parties have said.
Yes, go on.
Even parties I would never vote for, ever. But they all say at least one or two palatable things. But I was saying to Peter earlier before we went on air, 5 years ago there was a whole great romance of the Liberals and the Conservatives getting together. Yeah. And indeed, the year before, Gordon Brown did his best to get on side the Liberal Democrats. And yes. I think they had realised that, well, at least two of the parties are going to need each other. And I think over the last 6 months to a year, they have just basically, I'm thinking that the Liberals and the Conservatives, they have just deliberately disagreed with what the other have said. In fact, in the papers today, Nick Cameron, they've made
there's a point
emerging already. I can see that.
Yeah. Nick Clegg said, well, if David Cameron is too good to debate with Uncle Ed Miliband, then I will. But I think they are going to do this, and there's going to be a lot of posturing and a lot of hot air. But I indeed think that they'll need each other again. I cannot see the Liberals getting to that height of power again on their own. And in fact, we haven't had a Liberal PM since, was it Lloyd George? Was he Liberal?
He was Liberal,
yes, and I think that might have been it.
Yes, you may well be right.
Well, I know Churchill moved about, didn't he?
Well, yeah, it's interesting that this the sort of career politician just trying to get on and get into power has always been with us. And Winston Churchill, of course, crossed the side of the house, changed parties several times in his career, and it's always been happening. And we don't seem to get better politicians. I think that's the point. But that doesn't mean to say that all politicians are just out for themselves. Yes, there are shady deals. Yes, they are, they need to get on in their career, but don't we all want to get on in our career? I think that it's a mistake to just say, well, because they have faults, we can't vote for them and we're not going to vote. Well, then you're going to get the most unscrupulous people getting in, aren't you? If you're not going to actually pay attention to what's going on. Yes. We certainly need to vote and need to make a decision and try and get the best information possible. But the problem then is just one more thing to say before I throw it back to you, Mark, and that is that the person the party that will win will probably be those, and stick my neck out here, it's going to be the party that manages to keep most of its traditional voters. Because they all have their heartland of voters. And the Labour Party has lost a huge tranche of them in Scotland, as the SNP up in Scotland seem to have taken over the position of Labour. So I'm going to say I believe that the Conservatives will get the most votes and the most seats in the election. There you are, I've said it. That's what I believe.
Yes.
You can hold to it.
I think that one of the things that needs to be mentioned here, we talked about the grey politicians earlier, and I think that there is an element of that. The one thing that is different this time is that we have a number of other parties like UKIP and the Green Party, as well, of course, obviously the Liberal Democrats, which are, for the first time, are actually on a higher platform. And although I'm not necessarily advocating UKIP's policy, what Nigel Farage and his colleagues have done is they've brought to attention key issues, whether it's in immigration and one or two other policies, but at least have tried to put their mark down and differentiate themselves to really raise some issues to get people thinking. Now, I know that that's going to be, as you say, right at the beginning of this program. It has been a very boring exercise for people. It does last a very long time. But I think that the key point here is that clearly UKIP have poached a number of votes from Conservatives. Yes, of course, in Labour. You're right, Pete, in terms of the constituencies, because the dynamics of the way that the UK works is such that you, of course, we don't have proportional representation. So it's possible that you could have a very high percentage of the vote, but not necessarily win. So the tactical voting is going to be very important. And that's where I think that the likes of UKIP and to a certain extent the Liberal Democrats are going to actually play a crucial part in this election, unlike in previous elections. But I also have a slightly bolder statement as well, and that is I believe that the term between 2015 and 2020 is critical for the two main parties. That's the Conservatives and Labour. Whoever wins will basically have to deliver. Unfortunately, what we've seen over the last 30 years is governments come and go who have walked through either economic disaster, social disasters. We've seen the NHS crumble. We've seen education tinkered with. And I think that the electorate are starting to look to other parties, small as they may be today, but I think will play a significant role if either the Conservatives or Labour, whoever gets in, does not actually address some of these major issues that have lingered for decades.
Well, you see, I think there's an issue with how do you respond to the fact that some of the problems, the issues that we've got in the country, go back so many years. You see, what you do is one way to cope with it is just to pretend it's all not happening and that someone can lead you,
Yes.
And so that you don't vote at all and you ignore it all, say, oh, they're all the same, or you say, oh, I'm going to vote for the people I've always voted for. There's a very few people, who are called the floating voters. They're very few in number who actually decide the election because of our system. They have to be floating voters in a constituency where it's not all sewn up for one party. It has been for many years. So, but things did change. The Labour Party was the start of the 20th century. They came into being. So what could happen is the start of the 21st century. It all changes.
It all changes.
Yes.
Well, my first ever vote in a general was 2001.
Okay.
I was still 19 at the time.
And you've always voted Monster Raving Loony Party?
Yes,
correct?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they've got it. No, but explain a lot.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, they've been in power for the last 5 years.
Exactly. I still want the £1 million note. In fact, my first ever vote was the 2000 mayoral election.
Oh, okay. Yes, for the Mayor of London.
Yes, for the Mayor of London. And so I was a mere 18, and it was very exciting to be able to vote. And this is why I think, like I say, people don't vote. I think it really is whether we are in fact actually listened to as a populace. That we could spend a whole 3 hours on that question alone. But I think the fact that we can vote and people don't, I get so disheartened. And I think even if you don't agree, at least vote for the people you disagree with the least.
Yeah. I mean, it is depressing that we don't see any of the major political parties willing to actually grapple with the issues at hand. But you have to say that it's sort of our fault as an electorate in that if they really did make tough decisions about cutting back on spending, for example, they wouldn't get into power the next time. It's because of our system of we're in a type of democracy. They've got to answer to us. So it must be to a certain extent our fault that we've got the leaders that we've got. But before we get to saying who I've said my piece of who I think will win. Before we get to saying who we think is going to win the election. First of all, we could say straight away that we think the loser is going to be the country as a whole. No, perhaps that's too negative. However true it might be.
You heard it here.
Yes.
But before we say who we each think's going to win, and then wait to see whether we're right. I just wanted to bring up a smaller party that we've talked about on the Good News Show. I'm not sure if it's featured on Mark and Pete. But about the Christian People's Alliance, which is I believe currently the only functioning actual Christian party in Britain. There were a couple a few years ago. Maybe I'm wrong about that, and you could do a search and find someone. But certainly they have a few councillors. They're a functioning party. The Christian People's Alliance will be calling for a lot of things that we might disagree with in terms of social engineering, referring back again to same-sex marriage that the government has done. So they be against that, but they be against that. But given the opportunity to vote for them, would you actually vote for a Christian candidate? That's the question. What do you think? Would you, Mark, James, would you vote for a Christian candidate? Not just a Christian, but a Christian who's on a Christian ticket, Christian People's Alliance, if they stood in your area?
Well, in my opinion, I think that would be refreshing, and there's a number of reasons. So on the Mark and Pete show, and I'm sure on the Good News show, that what we talk about are values, and that really stems from obviously the base principles that come from the Bible. And I often believe that what we've seen over the last 10, maybe even 20 years hasn't really been exemplary. We've seen scandals from MPs stealing, thou shalt not steal. We've seen MPs lying, and again it goes on. And I think that having somebody who stands for a cause, whether it's political or with faith, is actually a good combination. And in my opinion, one of the things that we lack in our society are role models. And I know it's often a glib term, but if you actually look at the landscape today of politicians who are running into this election fever, would you really feel that they act as a role model? Can you really turn to any leader or even a member of the party who you can genuinely say follows a principle, even if you're not a religious person, a principle that you really respect? And I think that somebody who did stand on that platform, I think, would actually be respected by the public and trusted by the public.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, I think what Mark went to say was not right at the start of that. He said, "I'm sure" on the Good News Show. What he meant is, as I listen every week, I know it's a new show.
Well, exactly.
That's what he intended to say. So, James, what would you do? Would you, Judgment James? Would you vote for a Christian candidate?
I actually did vote for the Christian People's Alliance.
There we are.
I've got to say, back in 2000, I voted. Well, the Christian People's Alliance were my second choice. Right. And I did vote for Uncle Boris back then. But in terms of, yes, I'm reminded of Blackadder when he puts Baldrick up for an MP. Well, we will fight this election on policies, not personalities. Oh, really? Why is that? Because our candidate has no personality. Now, I mean, I wouldn't mind. I wish I could vote purely on policy and purely on something I'm passionate about. But no one party has enough for me to say, yes, that's everything I believe. But if a Christian party did indeed was able to rally up Christians and say, right, this is what we believe, this is why, let's stand up for it, and hopefully others will join along. If that were to happen, they would get my vote. But I don't think they themselves are shouting loud enough to inspire people.
No, maybe not. I mean, I am a big supporter of the Christian People's Alliance, but they are very small at the moment. Given the choice, I would vote for them, but they can't stand in every area. And so you're then looking at how are we going to decide who to vote for, and there were different policies, and the personalities do come into it, insofar as it reflects the character of the individual. You know, if you think this person isn't trustworthy, you don't want to vote for them. So it's very difficult, and actually, I don't know how I'm going to vote. I'm going to say that now in my area here. And I haven't registered yet, so maybe if I don't get registered. But I've said my piece. I believe that the Conservatives are going to win, but only just, and I think they'll have to either go into coalition or have a minority government.
Okay, so as we come towards the end of the show, we'll ask Judgment James, and then I'll give my conclusion. So, Judgment James, how do you think the UK election will unfold?
Again, I think it's going to be another coalition. I really do. Other than that, I would vote for the Judean People's Front.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's we were always looking for important stakeholders like that. Yes. So, in my opinion, I think you're right. I think it will be a hung parliament, but I actually do believe that the Labour Party will probably turn out to be the biggest party, with the one exception that they will probably need the support of either the Liberal Democrats or the Scottish National Party. So let's turn it to our listeners. What do you think? Do you think that will be the case? Do you agree with Pete? Do you believe with Judgment James? Or do you believe with Mellow Mark? But we invite you to let us know your thoughts. Do you think it will be a hung parliament? But the most important thing is exercise your right to vote. It does matter. So join us again next time for more colourful conversations with Mark and Pete. And don't forget the Good News Show too.